Man at Work. This is a simple stacking game, balancing game that can be played with families. You can play with children because the general idea is pretty simple. However, the rulebook leaves things a little bit vague in many areas, so as sometimes balancing games do, like when does your turn exactly end, when does your turn exactly begin, what does it really count as, this or that. So sometimes if you're playing with children, actually you will maybe want to have an adult that supervises children playing and makes decisions as a referee. But it's also a game that is creative and ridiculous and fun enough that I think you could play it and have a good time with it if you're playing with your adult friends a game night, especially if you want to take a break from maybe some heavier fare. We're gonna build a crazy building, and as we do so, we're gonna try to impress Boss Rita. You have a deck of task cards, and we'll see what they do. You shuffle, 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 and you place the card representing Rita about a quarter down. And then you will draw cards, and that will indicate what you need to add to the building. When Rita shows up, I just lost her. When Rita shows up, she stays face up for the rest of the game, and it will give players opportunities to collect Employee of the Month awards that will help you win the game. Now, to set up the game, the youngest player places 3 supports on the table. They can place them in any way they want. If one is vertical and horizontal, the game is particularly hard. You could, but again, they can place them any way they want. And let's say that just for the sake of this demonstration, I'm putting them slightly slanted. One is laying down, one is quote-unquote standing. And then we have these girders. There are 4 kinds of them: purple, white, orange, and black. And again, the youngest player in setting up the game places them in any way that they want, as long as they're not touching the playing surface. Then we have these adorable meeples wearing plastic hard hats. And again, to set up the game, the youngest player will need to add 1 to the structure. Then each player receives 3 safety awards. When it's your turn and you have to add elements to the structure, if you make anything fall from the structure and that hits the playing surface, then you lose 1 of your safety awards. If you lose all 3, you are out of the game. When you add a new element, the new thing that you add that is the highest thing that there is on the structure, and Rita has showed up, then you collect an Employee of the Month award. And if you collect a certain number of them, you also win the game. So you win the game either by collecting enough of these awards or by being the last player standing if everybody else has lost all of their safety certificates. So, but how do we know what we're supposed to add to the building? Well, again, we have this deck of task cards. When it's your turn, you will flip 1 face up. Now, the back of the card still on top of the deck tells you what you need to add. In this case, a worker, as identified by the hard hat, that will need to touch a white girder or an orange girder. And then the card that is face up next to it will tell you another condition. For example, here I need to connect the worker with a beam. Beams are these things that the workers will carry and that they are particularly treacherous and slippery. It could have been instead that I was tasked with adding a girder, and say here the condition would be that I also need to add a new support and touch a different color. The girder card also tells me what I need to add. So black or white girder, in this case, also adding a new support and touching a different color. And let's say that that's what we're gonna do now. Suppose that I decide then to place this one here. My options were white or black. I decide that I want to add white, and now this white here is touching purple. And so we're good to go. I completed my task, and now it goes to the next player that flips the card, and now they have to add a worker on a black or orange girder close to an edge, as close as possible. So black or orange, close to an edge. I guess we can place it here next to this little buddy. I think they'll be friends. And that completes that player's turn. Next player will need to add another worker with a beam. These beams are so tricky and needs to be added to a purple or a white. And we're gonna place it here, for example. Oopsie, that was already tricky. Because sometimes they look like perfectly flat, and as you put a component on, it turns out that they're not maybe exactly flat. And maybe I'm gonna put this one here so that the girder behind, because those can be really tricky. Another incredibly tricky component is the brick. Sometimes you will have to add a worker that carries a brick, and just placing a brick and just getting there is particularly, they're just slippery. And so the favorite technique is that from beginning to end, you place the brick holding the meeple at an angle, and then you place it on a beam that will keep that angle. And suppose that, for example, I was supposed to place it on a white beam. There you go. So this is how it goes. Oh, here maybe a girder, purple or orange, touching the same color. And you know what? I'll go with purple. So that's the way it works. And you're thinking, yeah, that's I've seen a lot of stacking games like that. Yes, you have, and so have I. And yet, as you play it, and as this thing grows, and those men at work start like trembling, you just get the sense, I mean, I get the sense that this game just feels a little more creative, a little freer, a little more freeform, a little stranger than a lot of other ones. Oh, here, orange or white, and I need to balance it. So I need to place it so that the center part stays on another girder and the two edges are not touching. And so you can get really creative, and then of course when Rita shows up, then what I just did, that was be perfectly fine in the early phases of the game, but then you start getting a little more excited, because when Rita is there, you really want to show off, and then you want to try to put things as high as you can. For example, maybe I can balance it there, that way instead. Come on. Oh. See, I'm taking bigger risks in the hope of a bigger reward, which I will not get. But by so doing, now that tip there is higher, is the highest thing that there is, and so I get my Employee of the Month. Thank you, Rita, for motivating me to do really dangerous stuff in the game. So this is the essence of Man at Work. This deck will give you the idea of the tasks being divided into two cards. Creating different things brings a lot of variety to the game, so you really don't know what's going to happen. And the game also comes with several variants that I think make the game even more fun. In particular, our favorite variant, I played the game with my daughters, sometimes with just one of them, sometimes with both of them, so I play with 2 and 3 players. My daughter Amelia likes it so much, actually she also played it solitaire. She simply plays it to see how many Employee of the Month tokens she can score before she loses all 3 safety certificates. So she came up with that variant. But one of the variants that come with the game that are described in the rulebook is the Foreman variant, in which each player receives 2 cards at the beginning of the game, and when it is their turn, they can play one of them either face down on top or face up, and simply to change some of the tasks. Like, oh man, I really don't want to place that guy there, so I'm going to place that card here. So instead of a worker, I'll play a girder. Or I don't like that condition, so I'm going to play one of my cards to cover that condition. So that gives a little more flexibility, and it's still only twice per game that you get to do it. Another interesting variant is with the crane. The crane is this nice component here. At the beginning of the game, I didn't do it, but basically you place it in the middle of the construction area at the beginning of the game. And what it does, it stays there. It sits there. But why is that interesting? Because you can lean things, you can build around it. You will build around it because, again, usually it is in the middle of the game. You can lean things against it, and that can help with some meeples that otherwise would be falling to the side, some of those annoying beams, so you also lean them over. You can put things, again, around it in different ways. Suppose, again, that I got the option of adding a support and a beam. That's probably wouldn't be legal, but just to give you a sense of how you could use the crane to add even more construction options. So it gets even crazier when you have the crane. However, the rulebook doesn't say if the crane counts as an element of the construction work or construction place when we are counting the highest element. So if you're playing with the crane, almost always the game will go to who survives the longest. You don't really have many chances of getting higher than the crane. Even if you set up the 3 supporters vertical at the beginning of the game, so you're already high up, then maybe somebody collects a support, an employee of the month or 2, but I still have to see a game where the crane is counted as an element of the construction where you get employee of the month. That is, where you get higher than that enough times to win the game by collecting these tokens. But again, the rulebook doesn't say one way or the other, so sometimes we play that way, and sometimes we play that the crane doesn't count as an element of the construction for the purpose of seeing what is the highest place, and then we simply check again which component is the highest as normal. So this is the idea behind Men at Work. Yes, it is a simple game, and yes, you think, okay, stacking games, balancing games, I've seen so many, dime a dozen, but this one, my only complaint is that, again, the rulebook leaves a little bit, some areas are a little bit vague. I wish there was more detail, more clarity on some of the details. So you still have to make it work. You still have to discuss things. But other than that, it's very creative. It's very fun. To me, it's just more creative, more fun, more freeform, more crazy looking and exciting than a lot of other games in the genre. So definitely I had a great time playing Men at Work with my daughters. And you know what? After filming this video, I think I'll play a little bit. I think I'll finish this game that I got here, Cider version, because it's just a lot of fun.